provincial exams, one grade 11 and their English 12. I think now we have all of our students who have finished any missing exams from grade 10 or 11, or we might have one or two who we scheduled to do that. So I think everybody's in pretty good shape heading towards the provincial exam piece at the end of the year. Remember, provincial exam results are available at the end of June. The ministry doesn't send them to you. You need to go onto the account that you've created on the ministry website to get them. You have a year after the first time, or after finishing the course, to rewrite a provincial exam. So if your son wrote in May and didn't write in June, he could still change his mind later on. He'd have to figure out a way to come back here to write. You can request the provincial exam to be, they call it remarked now. So if you feel that the score doesn't reflect what your son says he felt he did on the exam, you can get a form from the ministry or ask us for the form, and then they'll remark the exam. Theoretically, they say the remark exam counts if the remark counts if it's higher or lower. In reality, I don't think it would be lower because it's going to be pretty low anyhow if you're asking them to remark it. Your sons are the last students, or the last year of students, to qualify for the provincial exam program, the provincial scholarship program, which is based on provincial exams, which is $1,000. They need to be a Canadian citizen or a landed immigrant. It's based on their results on the provincial exams. You can find out information on the ministry website. I think they don't let you know whether you've won a provincial scholarship or not until October 15th because they want to leave time for the results from the August provincial exams to come in. So you won't find out about that right away at the end of June. The $1,000 that you get if you're, I think it's one of the top 5,000 students in the province, is actually really portable. So it's not limited to BC universities in any manner. Once again, if you go onto the ministry website, you'll find a link that you can follow that will eventually, I think it's a little drop box eventually that will tell you which institutions you can take your provincial scholarship money to. AP exams are the first couple of weeks in May 2nd to 13th. Everything's available on the College Board website. I think Mr. Ziff has posted dates outside of his office, and I know he registered grade 12s for the AP exams, I think, on Monday, and then he'll follow up with the grade 11s. We find that fewer and fewer grade 12s write the AP exams because the results come in the middle of July, by which time the university stuff is all over. We have more grade 11s who write AP exams than grade 12s. We have internal final exams for our academic courses. These ones are June 13th to 16th. June 17th is prize day. We don't have grade 12s write an internal exam on prize day, so they can get ready for the prize day. Once again, I'm sure Mr. Ziff published all of that information on the school's website back in January. In general, the internal final exams count about 25% of the students' mark for that course. We don't want to examine students twice, so we don't have any internal final exams for AP courses, even though most grade 12 students, or many grade 12 students, don't bother writing the AP exam. We still don't want to set up the situation where we could be examining students twice, so no internal final exams for AP courses. If your son is in a course that has double credit, for example, Chem 12 out of his Chem AP course, or History 12 out of his Euro History AP course, then there is an internal final exam for that grade 12 portion, and we feel that that's not double examining students because he is getting credit for 2 courses out of that 1 slot on his timetable. There's another scholarship program. It used to be called the District Scholarship. Now it's called the Dogwood District Scholarship. I'm just letting you know because students need to apply. The application deadline is passed. Many of your sons may have applied. There's lots of categories. There's fine arts, there's sports, there's languages. They have to appear at an adjudication evening, which is actually tomorrow night. So if your son has applied for the district scholarship or Dogwood District Scholarship, he should be getting ready to be adjudicated tomorrow night. A couple of other details. All of your sons should have filled out what's called a PSI, which stands for Post-Secondary Institution. It's yet another piece that's available on the ministry website. What the PSI does is it tells the ministry where to send your son's final marks. So the official proof of graduation and your son's official from the ministry final marks go to universities that your son has listed on this PSI form. And if your son hasn't filled out the PSI form, the ministry won't know where to send his final results. So you should perhaps check with your son that he has correctly filled it out. I think university counseling people have been checking with the students on their caseload to make sure that that final piece is done, because that's the final piece that gets your son into the university. One other final piece that as we get later on in the year, students sometimes feel is less and less important. There's a graduation requirement called graduation transitions. Graduation transitions doesn't have to be a course, but we deliver it as a course. One thing that students do for graduation transitions is they do a portfolio and they hand that into our course is called Planning Transitions 12. Students need to make sure their portfolio is complete because it's a graduation requirement. We probably still have a few students from semester 1, it's a semestered course, who haven't finished their graduation transitions portfolio. If you could check with your son to make sure he's finished it from semester 1, or if he's in semester 2, that he's actually actively working on it and is going to complete it. We try to reduce to 0, if possible, the number of students flapping around on June 28th to get their portfolio in before we send off all of the information to the ministry. And the last piece I have, that's why you were laughing. I wondered what was happening. I knew something was happening behind me, but I didn't know what. Yeah, that's my last piece. I really want to thank you for the last 5 years and for all of the help and support I've received from you in working with your sons, and to let you know just how much I've enjoyed working with you and your sons, and I wish you and your sons all the best for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. A big thank you to Mr. Hesketh, who was over here wrestling with various chords and got this behind us. I was going to make a comment about introducing a new sort of yoga for parents for the previous slides, but I think we're okay now that things are back on track. Our next two speakers are delivering a little bit of news and updates on the university application process. So I'm going to call Mrs. Matthews and Mr. Beckett forward to the podium, please. Mr. Beckett first, I think.
So Ms. Wessler again apologizes that she can't be here tonight, but even though she's not here in person, she's really left her print on this PowerPoint by including a number of incredibly colorful pictures. And if you've been to any of her presentations before, you know how much she loves her pictures. So she, I think, showed this one at the beginning of last year. It's the Mission Impossible, and apart from the unfortunate reference to George W. Bush's foreign policy, the mission is virtually accomplished for almost all of our students right now. Most of them, or the vast majority of them, have an acceptance to at least one post-secondary institution. So in the future was a bit unclear at the beginning of the year, or this time last year. Hopefully we've got a lot more clarity, and we've been through an incredible process to get to this point. It has had its ups and downs over the course of the year. There's a lot of anxiety about where they should apply at the beginning of the year. A lot of stress in terms of putting together the essays or the personal statements as the year went on. Going through draft after draft after draft with many of your sons on those essays was an interesting experience. And then, of course, in the spring, the days when the universities were announcing, there was a lot more turmoil as the boys sort of gathered in the library at 2 o'clock to hear some of the American universities' results coming in, and there was some tears of joy and some tears of sadness at that point. In the end, we processed 1,100 applications, and we hosted 70 university visits at St. George's this year. 70 different universities coming to the school and talking to the boys about the programs at their school. The boys have applied to over 180 schools worldwide. Over 70 students applied to U.S. institutions, and 99% of the grade to Canadian institutions. We had quite a number of special events and profiles throughout the year. Just an absolutely brilliant start to the year with Dr. Joseph talking about the university essay, Dr. Pruto talking about finding the right fit for you in terms of a university or college. And so it was a really great and interesting year where a lot was learned by all, especially me actually this year as my first year in university counseling. We had the No Pie Until You Apply Day, which was to motivate students to get their applications in before we broke for term break and term one. And coming up, we've got Cake Day 2016 for the boys who've been through the entire process. Just some pictures here of various things throughout the year. This is the Portfolio Day for the Arts project. There's the No Pie Till You Apply pies. And just some final statistics here, final bits of information before I pass on to Ms. Matthews. The most popular Canadian schools are up there. Western, of course, is topping the list. University of Toronto, which has ebbed and flowed over the years, is back up to almost the top again. Queen's is hugely popular. UBC and, of course, McGill. In the United States, most popular applied to is the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Berkeley, UCLA, NYU, Cornell, and then, of course, the UK. And I was really lucky to work with a boy this year who managed to gain acceptance to Cambridge for math and physics, an exceptional young man. At any rate, so now your boys generally, for the most part, have an idea of where they're going, and it's going to be all over the world. And at this point, pass off to Ms. Matthews.
Good evening, everybody. I think this picture was very aptly selected by Christine because I think it does stand as a wonderful symbol for what's gone on since September. Those parents who have children heading off to London, take heart. I looked, 18,958 kilometres. It isn't that far. It's 7,094 kilometres. Chicago, 2,851 kilometres, not sounding quite so far. But McGill, 3,051, and you thought they were staying close to home. Toronto, 2,723. UBC, 5. So I hope that either fills you with excitement or fills you with pleasure that they're only going to be 5 kilometres away. But my suspicion is that those who are going to UBC aren't necessarily going to be home any more frequently than those who are heading off to St Andrews in Scotland, which is probably a lot more than 7,000 kilometres away. Anyway, it has been a wonderful privilege to work with your sons. On behalf of all 4 counsellors and Mr. Collins, I think we'd all like to say thank you. Thank you for trusting us. We have learned a lot from your sons and certainly got to know them very well. And there's been some wonderful journeys from boys sitting down, having no idea what they wanted to do in September, and ending up doing programs they've never heard of before. So there's been some wonderful new programs, and the depth and breadth of their applications has been really encouraging. So next steps. The majority of students have heard back from the majority of their universities, but there are still some yet to come. I had addressed particularly McMaster Health Science, who are notoriously late. They have 3,800 applications to whittle down to 160 places. And they read every application and it goes through a panel. So their results will not come out until around May 1st, May 3rd. Similarly, with Waterloo, they received an outstanding number of applications this year, and they're saying the process of acceptance could go right through to mid-May, and afterwards as people decline the offers that they've received. Same would be said with UBC. We have a number of boys waiting to hear from UBC. They received 40,000 applications this year, and 20,000 of them appeared on the last day to apply. So that really set them back. Hopefully we didn't have 160 boys waiting till that last day. I would ask you to talk to your sons about their conditional acceptances. They're not to be ignored, particularly with the UK. The UK will hold you to the acceptances, to the offer, which may be a certain number of APs or a certain graduating average. The same with Canadian universities. There are some conditions they need to be adhered to, and at that point I would put a real plug in for the English 12 exam that is about to be written. That exam is worth 40% of the mark. So if your son is going into the exam with a mark that isn't terribly strong, he wants to make sure that he really prepares for that exam, and the English teachers are certainly there to help, and we university counsellors can even give some advice in that area too. Nice thing is, if it goes all wrong, they do have a second chance, which is why we moved the exam to May, so that they could have a second go at it at no penalty. You were allowed to take the examination twice. But that English exam is really, really important. Accepting offers. Every school has a different deadline. That's perhaps a little bit of an exaggeration, but I'd like to say that so that you take a really close look at those letters of acceptance or emails that came in a long time ago and you kind of forget about them. But Western's date is coming up next week. Most of the universities are May 1st. Some are in June. I'm not going to be specific because I want you to encourage your son to go back into his OUAC account or to his UBC account or whatever it is and write down in his calendar when those dates are coming up, because it is horrible to suddenly realize that date has been and gone. Waitlisted, that's a hard one. Waitlisted means you were totally mission appropriate. It could have been you, but it happened to be him. But it's all not over, because there will be a lot of juggling as students turn down certain business schools, let's say, and offers open up. So it's just a matter of being patient. If you are US bound and you have done something really interesting or have a great final essay in history, let's say, that you think might help the admissions committee decide that you're the one for the wait list, then you are encouraged to talk to your counsellor and basically touch base with the university. Waitlisting in other universities, in Canada, for example, it would be well worth talking to the individual counsellor so that we can see what we can do if necessary, and particularly as it gets into June. And also, if there are any disappointments following the English exam, that's when we gear up again and try and find that perfect spot for your son. Holding multiple offers is something we don't encourage. We don't believe it's ethically right to hold 3 or 4 offers where you have the leisure of making your decision. You can't avoid that if you're going to go and you're waiting for McMaster Health Science. You have to accept this school by May 1st, and yet your first choice of McMaster hasn't let you know whether you've been accepted or not. So there are cases where you need to do that, but please encourage your sons to make a decision. It actually doesn't get any easier. Sometimes they are suffering a little bit from their own success, that they applied to 8 schools and wow, I got into all 8, now what do I do? But the sooner that can be narrowed down and choice made, the better. And also, it may ultimately save you some money, because the next step is residence, and residence usually means a deposit and usually means around $500. So having to pay 2 residence fees while you decide which school to go to can end up being costly. Remember, until you've seen the receipt and the confirmation, you haven't paid that residence deposit. So just be sure that that fee has gone through with the processing, because you do not want to not have a residence room to go to. On that topic, a few boys have suggested, well, I'm not going into residence, so I don't need to watch that timeline. I'm going to live in an apartment. I would really talk that through very carefully, because there's great value in residence life. And I think going into an apartment in your first year can mean that you miss out on a wonderful cultural experience of first year university life, and there are many friends to be made there. Final transcripts, Mr. Collins mentioned those. We will be chasing the boys to make sure they have their PSI filled in for Miss Maharelli. When I think about transcripts, it does also make me think about these acceptances, and I would say double check with your son his graduating his marks that he applied to university with. We did have one boy where the university actually miscalculated his mark, and he didn't get as high an entrance scholarship as he actually should have done. Most scholarships are based on the mark with which you applied, but it is worth double checking that and seeing, okay, my average is 91. Should I be receiving $2,000 or $3,000? So just double check that. Some universities, by the way, do not give any money out. Others do. So finish the year strong is definitely our message. I guess Miss Wessler put that up to show you the excitement, the joy, the happiness that goes on in the next few months. There are some of the flags from various schools to which boys have applied and been successful in getting into. We will be putting up our map so that we can have them put their little flags up so that we can see how students are spreading out all over the globe. There's the cake. We've moved from pie to a graduation cake, which we will have outside on one sunny day. We'll be changing the 2:15 to 2:16. And every new beginning is some other beginning's end. I remember this time last year, Miss Wessler being very moved by this. I guess she got Liam's little baby boots up there, and you can probably see an image of your son's little baby shoes too. Her son is now towards the end of his first year. It will go as quickly as this year has done. And indeed, boys are already coming back. I had a knock on the door tonight from a boy who ended up at Waterloo in urban planning. He'd never heard of urban planning and had no interest in Waterloo at the beginning of his grade 12 year. You should see him today and how proud he was to come back and talk about what a wonderful journey it had been, and he's definitely got his running shoes on. So thank you again, and we're still here for the boys, we're still here for you. Please call, please email. Any questions about visa requirements for the US or the UK residents, some of those forms are tricky to fill in. We're still here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matthews. So, parents, how are you doing? Oh, that's very quiet. No, you're here, you can take part. How are you guys doing? Good, good. Well, your 12s are doing very well. I'm really pleased with the way they've come through the year and how they appear to be finishing. if I ask the boys, is the year over? And they say, oh, it's almost over, but it's not quite. There are a number of things we still have to get through. And just looking at the calendar, we've got classwork, cross grade, student-run assemblies, Earth Week, sporting events, club activities, fundraising events, Spy versus Spy, Country Fair, AP exams, Spring Music Concert, that's next week. Student art sales, music awards, provincial sports championships, athletic banquet, internal exams, provincial exams, just one of those now, graduation events, and much more. There's only 9 weeks left in which we're trying to do all these things and so much more. So we want to make sure your boys are actively engaged. They are involved in what is happening at their school. So there are a number of questions coming to from the boys right now about what's happening regarding graduation. So I'd like to go through some of the graduation events with you. This was also posted on the school website about a week and a half ago. And if you haven't yet found it, if you go to senior school on the school website, scroll to the bottom of the list, and these dates are there as well. Before I get to these, a big thank you to Kelly Dong and Elaine Pabledo, and through them, all the parents who've helped in the organization, the planning, and are still to help in the future of putting all these events together and guiding the boys in some of their decisions about their after-grad events. It takes a lot of people to put these events together and for them to be the success, which I know they will be. So the first event, not too far from now, on Sunday, May 29th, is the Mother-Son Social. You do need to respond to this. I believe an Evite was sent out last week. Now that went to all the parents whose email was up to date on the parent list. If you didn't get that email, if you didn't get that Evite, email me. What might have happened is your address may not be one of the ones that's been released to all the parents, or it may have changed in the last little while. So if you didn't get that event, email me and I'll put you through to Kelly Dong, and she'll make sure you have all the arrangements for that. This is, I think, the third year we've had this event, and it's a very, very special time for the mothers and the sons who are graduating. Shortly thereafter, about a week and a half after, we have the Dad Grad Breakfast. We host that at the school here. The point person for that is Wendy Klein, and there will be an email sent out from my office inviting, again, all dads and their sons to come to that. One thing to think about, not all our boys have fathers in town, not all our boys have fathers, and the same thing applies with the Mother-Son Social. If there's somebody who has had a strong connection with your son over the years who he would like to invite to one of these events, then that is also absolutely okay. I know last year, for example, Mr. Chamberlain came as a surrogate dad for one of the parents, and I think Mr. Hesketh came as a surrogate dad for about 5 of the boys in the Harker Hall. So that is also welcomed at the event. The grad barbecue, we've moved it ahead a little bit this year. Normally it's occurring the day after graduation, but the boys have got something else on that day, so we're moving it to the Sunday after classes finish, which means it's a Sunday before internal exams start. But I still think the boys can find time to take out for a couple of hours and just hang out together. That's going to be at the Peretz family home. Emails will be sent out. The contact person there is Leanne, and thank you to the Peretz family for hosting this. That email will also, that's shown up here, will also be on the invitation that gets sent out from my office. And that is a chance for the boys sort of to get together, just the boys, for one last time. Moving ahead to Friday, June 17th, we have the Georgian lunch. And seeing this reminds me to introduce the last person we have tonight. That's Mr. Blackman. He's going to give a speak in a few minutes. Mr. Blackman is the head of Georgian Relations, and he is the point person for your sons keeping contact with the school next year, the year after, and for years and years after that. The Georgians host that lunch. It's on the day of graduation. It's in McLean Hall, and that's just for the boys. There'll be a few Georgians there, and we give out a couple of awards, and really it's the welcome into the Georgian Society. So they'll get to find a little bit more about what that involves at the school. Also on that date, a little bit later, we have the Senior School Prize Day. Now there is a rehearsal for the boys the night before. when we have the big tent set up. The last couple of years, that's conflicted with, I believe, the York House or Crofton House grad. I should know which, but I can't remember which one. I don't know if there's a conflict, but of course, if boys have a conflict for that night, all they have to do is just let me know, and we can walk them through the ceremony the next day. You don't need tickets for that. There is a section that's set aside for graduation parents, but there are lots of graduating parents and families who want to be there, so it is sort of first come, first serve. So you need to get there a little bit early. It doesn't mean you have to sleep out the night before. I don't think we've actually had that, but usually we'll have a couple parents who come there a little bit early to get good seats. If you need any help with parking or whatever, Ms. Kudrick's the point person for that. There's a reception that follows. If we have weather like we're having now, it'll be out on the fields, and that's a nice sort of wrap up for the event. There's nothing formal planned that night, so for those graduates who have a large family who's come together, that's a really, really good night to have those big family get-togethers and celebrations of the son's graduation or the boy's graduation. The next day, we have our graduation banquet. Other schools might call this a prom, and this starts with a reception, and this year the Masry family is hosting that reception. When we start to get the boys to fill in their order forms for the banquet, which we'll explain in a moment, there's an area on there where I ask for families to let me know how many guests will be attending the reception so we can give the host family some idea of what to expect in terms of numbers. Their home is in Kerrisdale, not Kerrisdale, it's in Shaughnessy, and that runs from 4 to 6. After that, we have the banquet, and this year we're returning to the Trade and Convention Center. It's a beautiful venue for the graduation. We're in the ballrooms that overlook Burrard Inlet, so we've got this huge expanse of glass looking at the mountains. 2 years ago it was rainy. 3 years ago it was rainy. 4 years ago it was really, really nice. We have the outside terrace as well. It's a beautiful, beautiful venue for that event. You don't require tickets for that event. Your sons will be booking and making those arrangements. Now, you've got to trust them. If you don't trust them, you can always sneak me an email, but do trust your sons to get it more or less right. And what they will be doing is they'll be connecting with other grads, so they construct tables that may have 2, sometimes 3 grad families with parents and guests and so forth. We have table sizes of 8, 10, or 12, so we can accommodate down there a fair range of sizes. Some boys come in formal dress, so they look pretty sharp in their tuxes. Some just come in suits, and the same applies to parents. It's a relatively formal event. Photographica, the company that looks after photographs for the student identification, and we're here a few weeks ago looking at some retakes. They will be down there and they'll have a booth set up. Every now and then people ask, well, what about photographs in the banquet hall? We found those are more disruptive. We don't mind families taking their own photographs at their table and their friends, but we don't want professional photographs being taken in there. It's a little bit too distracting for the evening. And while we're here, just one comment about liquor. At that graduation, we will have sort of wine and beer and drink service. We've had that in the past, but that is exclusively for parents, not for our graduates or for their dates. So even if your son or their date is 19, we ask that they do not imbibe there. And we ask the parents to be, I guess, the chief officers in that case in terms of looking after your sons and their dates, making sure that they are not drinking while we're there. There is one more grad event which the boys have been organizing this year with a little bit of parent input, and this is going to take place on Sunday, June 19th. I've got here details to be announced. Actually, we can announce that it's a boat cruise. The boys have organized that, and it's going to be taking place on the evening. I think they're departing about 7 o'clock. I'm not sure the final time for that. That is something that is organized by the boys, and it's facilitated by the parents. It's not a school event. And the boys have been madly fundraising for the last, I guess it's about 9.5 months now, to raise funds to pay for that. So that should come through with no or almost no cost to the boys. if they continue to do the fundraising job. And I think today they sold about $1,000 worth of Krispy Kremes. So they are doing well, and they continue to do well. And a big thank you to Alex Laurent, who's been the chief person behind that over the course of the school year. If you do have an interest in sponsoring part of that event to enrich it a little bit, by all means, let me know, and we can link you up with the grad committee. And I'm going to call up Mr. Blackman in a moment. I think this is my last slide. A couple things to think about. This is also a time of year where parents start to consider oh, no, there's one more thing before I call Mr. Blackman up. We'll get to this in a moment. If you're looking for something for your son to have as memento of the school, I recommend you go to the school store. There are lots and lots of things in there. There is a little memento that all grads are getting as a gift from the parents, and that's some luggage tags, and they'll get those on the Friday of graduation when we meet to have the Georgian lunch. They'll get a little luggage tag there. They were really, really popular last year, and the boys kind of looked at them at the banquet and thought, okay, well, that's kind of nice. And then as parents were sending their sons off to university, they were all leaving with their luggages tagged with their St. George's. So we're doing the same thing again this year, and I think the boys will enjoy it. But if you want something personal for your son, then the school store is there, and they do have a really nice selection of things. I still have my St. George's ring from 35 years ago that my parents bought as my graduation gift. It's a little banged up, but it's still has lots of memories. So I guess I need to describe senioritis. And this is actually not my doing. This is my predecessor in this position. Mr. Lawrence wrote this out, and I can't think of any way to say it better. But I just want to talk about this a little bit. We're at the stage, and it's come early this year because the weather is so fantastic right now that boys are thinking we're in summer mode, and we can't let them think that way too long. They must keep up their effort in the classroom. Mr. Beckett talked about this, Mr. Collins talked about this, Mrs. Matthews talked about this. We need the boys to keep working right the way through till June. They can't let up. What they're learning right now will help them on exams. What they're learning right now will help them next year, but it helps keep them on track. First and foremost, they must look after their classroom obligations. Students need to maintain their involvement in co-curriculars. So those things that have connected to the boys, to the staff, to the school outside of the classroom, they can't forget about those now. Those are really, really important part of their third term, their final term at Saints. So please remind your boys to fulfill those expectations. If they've done it this long, have them keep going. It's a really, really good way to enrich the final few weeks of the school. We try to make sure that your sons continue to respect their peers, respect their teachers and the school by adhering to the standards and codes around the school. So in terms of dress and decorum, we want the boys in their uniforms, right? So you may find the next little while you have a couple of bills come through for gray socks, because if I see them out of uniform, they're told to go buy a pair of gray socks. I apologize for that, but sometimes looking after the little things like socks, like how they're properly dressed, makes the big issues easier to handle. So little things, socks, hair. Let's try to keep their hair the same color it was when they came to school in September. I'll say no visible piercings, please. We don't want a big Band-Aid on our ear or across a nose. And they say, well, what'd you do? I cut myself. It's a little too obvious when they do that. So let them do that, if you wish, in July, but please not before graduation. Again, the boys should be in class, respecting their teachers and continuing to learn. Attendance is a real priority, and I know there have been a couple of boys I've spoken to recently who have forgotten that. Cooperation is a sign of respect for those who've worked with them for so long and so hard to get them where they are. So we can't have the boys disrupt that relationship with their teacher, their coach, their advisor, their principal on the last few weeks. The mantra for the grade 12 should be stay involved, be respectful, think before you act, stay true to who you are, and enjoy your final 2 months. And it's just about 2 months that are left. Typical stumbling blocks, English 12. Again, 40% of their final mark is based on that English 12 paper that they're going to be writing on May 12th. Another stumbling block is planning and transitions. There are a couple of boys who still need to get the material in from the first semester. And also behavior or actions off campus that impact on their life on campus. And the boys need to be really mindful and really cautious and need to think before they act. Could I ask Mr. Blackman to come up for a couple of words?
Good evening. The Georgians Network, as I hope many of you know, is a network of old boys that's around the world. I'm fortunate and I get to travel occasionally to Hong Kong or London, New York, Toronto, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Victoria, Kelowna, Calgary, to meet up and connect with old boys. At the annual Georgian dinner coming up in a few weeks, I've already had registrations from old boys who graduated in the 1940s. So your young, fine young men will soon be old boys, but young old boys. And they will be connected to a network of close to 5,000 old boys that are doing amazing things in amazing spots around the world. And I will be actively encouraging them to take advantage of that network. The Georgian Mentoring Program was launched in September, and we are matching young Georgians, second, third, fourth year university, to older old boys. And in fact, we're matching older old boys who are changing careers. So whether it's the events, whether it's the Georgia Mentoring Program, whether it's staying connected with their classmates, that's the function and role that my office and the staff that I work with are looking to make happen on a regular basis. Whether it's a phone call to track down an old classmate or a teacher looking to reach out to a recent grad to bring them back onto campus, my office will do everything we can to keep your sons connected to their class and to all the other classmates that they have from years gone by and going into the future. Getting them to stay connected is important, and there's huge value in that. So I'll give them information, and the prime piece of information we need is an email address for them. In a lot of cases, we'll have your email address and not their email address. So if you find yourself receiving information from me about the old boys, please encourage your son to let me know what the real email address is, and I'll try to track them down on LinkedIn or Facebook or in other ways. So if you have any questions, I'd love to ask them tonight. There's some familiar faces in the crowd, and if you've seen me running around in a pink referee uniform in the rugby games, then I'm happy to chat with you later tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackman. Do I have time for one really quick story? Okay, good. I was playing rugby in France. This was a long, long time ago, and the team I was played against we were playing in front of a very, very large audience. The French team had just scored, so there was all this shouting going on. We were lining up waiting to have their conversion kicked, and all of a sudden I heard this loud voice somewhere behind me yell, "St. George's." So I turned around, and there were about 3,000 people in the stands at the back there, and I looked up, and there was one old boy. He was a couple of years behind me. It was Scott Shepherd, waving. So I kind of waved back and then turned around, got back into the game we played on. But the reach of St. George's Old Boys is all over the world, and your sons will never know when they're going to encounter one. Probably not in the middle of a rugby match, but maybe somewhere else. So by all means, have them keep that connection going. So parents, you've now survived your last of I don't know how many parent evenings. So I want you to do a couple of things when you get out of your seat. Go home tonight, if you get a chance, and give your son a hug, because his being at the school is the reason why you've been able to come to these meetings and enjoy them so often over the past few years. So you can thank him for that. The other thing I'd like you to do is when you're out here, we've got some drinks, we've got some cookies, we've got some coffee. Enjoy those, but make sure you give each other a hug, because you are finishing as parents the end of what for your sons has been an invaluable learning experience. And I know I speak for all the staff and teachers here that we have enjoyed being a part of that experience with our boys tremendously over the years. So thank you very much for trusting us. I hope we have, in retrospect, earned your trust, and have a good evening tonight and enjoy the last 4, 5, 8 weeks, I guess, of St. George's School. Good night, all. Thank you.